right. Talk between Joan and the king is long and earnest. This interruption of his lost me. Verily, she was not guessing she knew, but helped by the vacancy that is in mind. This interruption of his lost me a remark or two of the other talk. However, I caught the king's next question. But tell me who you are and what would you? I am called Joan the maid. I'm called Joan the maid. Wait. I heard voices. That's my Joan of Arc. I did Joan of Arc as my it's called something. My studio in graduate school. I'm called Joan because she's my patron saint. Please pray for me, Joan. Saint Joan. I'm called Joan the maid, and am sent to say that the King of Heaven wills that you be crowned and consecrated in your good city of Reims, and be thereafter lieutenant of the Lord of Heaven, who is the King of France. And he willeth also that you set me at my appointed work and give me men at arms. After a slight pause, she added, her eye lighting at the sound of her words, for then will I raise the siege of Orleans and break the English power. The young monarch's amused face sobered a little when Miss Marshall's speech fell upon that sick air like a breath blown from embattled camps and fields of war, and his trifling smile presently faded wholly away and disappeared. He was grave now and thoughtful. After a little he waved his hand lightly, and all the people fell away and left those two by themselves in a vacant space. The knights and I moved to the opposite side of the hall and stood there. We saw Joan rise at a sign that she and the king talked privately together. All the host had been consumed with curiosity to see what Joan would do. Well, they had seen, and now they were full of astonishment to see that she had really performed that strange miracle according to the promise in her letter. And they were fully as much astonished to find that she was not overcome by the pomps and splendors about her, but was even more tranquil and at her ease in holding a speech with the monarch than ever they themselves had been, with all their practice and experience. As for our two knights, they were inflated beyond measure with pride in Joan, but nearly dumb as to speech, they not being able to think out any way to account for her managing to carry herself through this imposing ordeal without ever a mistake or an awkwardness of any kind to mar the grace and credit of her great performance. The talk between Joan and the king was long and earnest and held in low voices. We could not hear, but we had our eyes and could note effects. And presently we and all the house noted one effect which was memorable and striking, and had been set down in memoirs and histories and in testimonies at the process of rehabilitation by some who witnessed it. For all knew it was big with meaning, though none knew what that meaning was at the time, of course. For suddenly we saw the king shake off his indolent attitude and straighten up like a man, and at the same time look immeasurably astonished. It was as if Joan had told him something almost too wonderful for belief, and yet of a most uplifting and welcome nature. It was long before we found out the secret of this conversation, but we know it now, and all the world knows it. That part of the talk was like this, as one may read in all histories. The perplexed king asked Joan for a sign. He wanted to believe in her and her mission, and that her voices were supernatural and endowed with knowledge hidden from mortals. But how could he do this unless these voices could prove their claim in some absolute, unassailable way? It was then that Joan said, I will give you a sign, and you shall no more doubt. There is a secret trouble in your heart which you speak of to none, a doubt which wastes away your courage and makes you dream of throwing all away and fleeing from your own. Within this little while you have been praying in your own breast that God of his grace would resolve that doubt, even if the doing of it must show you that no kingly right is lodged in you. It was that amazed the king. For it was as she had said, his prayers was a secret of his own heart, and none but God could know about it. So he said, the sign is sufficient. I know now that these voices are of God. They have said true in this matter. If they had said more, tell it to me, I will believe. They have resolved that doubt, and I bring their very words, which are these. Thou art lawfully heir to the king of thy father, and true heir of France. God has spoken it. Now lift up your head and doubt no more, but give me men at arms and let me get about my work. Telling him he was of lawful birth was what straightened him up and made a man of him for a moment, removing his doubt upon that head and convincing him of his royal rights. And if any could have hanged his hindering and pestiferous, and pestiferous counsel, and we set him free, he would have answered Joan's prayers and set her in the field. But no, these creatures were only checked, not checkmated. They could invent some more delays. We had been made proud by the honors which had so distinguished Joan's entrance, and that place, honors restricted to personages of very high rank and worth, that pride was as nothing compared with the pride we had in the honor done by her upon leaving it. For as these first honors were shown only to the great, these last, up to this time, have been shown only to the royal. The king himself led Joan by the hand down the great hall to the door, the glittering multitude standing and making reverence as they passed, and the silver trumpets sounding those rich notes of theirs. Then he dismissed her with gracious words, bending low over her hand and kissing it. Always, from all companies, high or low, she went forth richer in honor and esteem than when she came. And the king did another handsome thing by Joan, for he sent us back to Courdray Castle, torch-lighted and in state, under escort of his own troop, his guard of honor, the only soldiers he had. And finely equipped and bedizened they were, too, though they hadn't seen the color of their wages since they were children, as a body might say. The wonders which Joan had been performing before the king had been carried all around by this time, so the road was so packed with people who wanted to get a sight of her that we could hardly dig through. And as for talking together, we couldn't, all attempts at talk being drowned in the storms of shouting and huzzas that broke out all along as we passed, and kept abreast of us like a wave the whole way.